Right, well, let's get started then. Welcome everyone to this Wantage Literary Festival free event. It's great that so many of you have managed to come along for this evening. We've got a really interesting hour or so ahead of us, so I hope you're strapped in and ready to go for the evening. Today's a free talk put on by the festival, seeing as we can't have our festival as usual later on in this year. But hopefully we're going to have many more events over the coming kind of weeks, so keep an eye on our social media and our Facebook for all of those. As it's a free talk, if you really enjoyed this evening and you think you can pop a little donation over to the festival to help us keep holding these events, that would be fantastic. You can find all our details of that over onto our website or on our Facebook page as well. Should probably introduce myself. My name's Sammy. I'm a volunteer for the Wantage Literary Festival, and I'm going to be your host for this evening. I'll be the one answering the questions, and we'll be hopefully giving a chance for some of you to ask some questions later on as well. A lot of you will hopefully have read the books that we're going to be talking about this evening already, but if you haven't done so, there will be a chance for you to buy them. You can get them from our bookshop in Tring. If you haven't seen the details on the Facebook event already, please have a look at that afterwards and order yourselves a copy, because they're well worth a read. And I think we're just about ready to get going. Before I get started and introduce our authors for this evening though, just want to let you know that we are recording this session, so you can watch it back later, tell your friends who weren't able to make it, and we'll hopefully be able to have some more events soon. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our three authors for the evening. We have Jo Thomas, we have Sue Moorcroft, and we have Jules Wake, also known as Julie Kaplan. So the three of us, or four of us I should say, are unmuted, so we're going to have conversations between ourselves, and we'll invite you for some questions a little bit later on. And I've asked our authors this evening to also pre-prepare a few things for us as well. So my first question that I'm going to throw out to all three of you, and you can fight amongst yourselves as to who answers first, and hopefully we'll get to hear from all of you as well. For those of you who might, or for the people in the audience who might not be too familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and about your current novels? Should we start with Jo for this one?
My name's Jo Thomas, and I write about food and locations and love and fun and laughter. That's me, really. There's always food at the heart of my books, and hopefully in a fabulous setting as well. The book I've got out at the moment is called Escape to the French Farmhouse, set in Provence, in the lavender fields of Provence. The book did you say the book I'm writing about as well?
You can tell me a little bit about that as well. That'd be fine.
The book I'm writing at the moment is set in Italy, just outside of Naples, and set all around the world of pizza.
Amazing. Sue, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Hi, I'm Sue Moorcroft. Actually, we all write in a fairly similar area. My books are very much uplifting, but there's real issues in there. And this is my current book, Summer on a Sunny Island, which is set in Malta, where I lived when I was a kid. Whoop, sorry about that. And it's got a lot in it about people getting drawn into the wrong company and what happens next.
Thank you. And Jules?
So I'm Jules Wake, but I write also as Julie Kaplan, and my two genres are quite different. So Julie Kaplan writes the Romantic Escapes series, which are very similar to Jo and Sue in that they focus on food and a foreign country, but there's also a lot of coziness and community in there. So it's about people finding themselves among friends. And my current book is the Little Tokyo Tea Shop, or the Little Tea Shop in Tokyo, which I keep getting wrong, which is not a very good start. And obviously it's set into Tokyo, and it covers a lot of Japanese food, but it also covers a lot of culture, and then there's an underlying love story that goes through it.
Fabulous, thank you all. That's given me a few questions. I'm going to come back to you later, some of the themes that you've been picking up on already, so prepare yourself for that. First question, or next question, why romantic fiction? Why did you choose to write this style of this genre of writing? What drew you to this over all the other types that are out there? Anyone can go first.
Well, I just love stories. It's what I like to read as well. I think there's enough hate in the world, there's enough crime in the world. I do tend to put my characters through the ringer before I let them be happy, and I like it when readers message me and say, I didn't know how you were going to get them together in the end, because I think, excellent, I've done my job in that case. I think the very first adult book I ever read was Neville Shoots a Town Like Alice, which is all about love. The hero is literally crucified to save the heroine. And I think that taught me what a strong thing love is, and I've written about it ever since.
Lovely.
I mean, I just, yes, I write what I want to read. All my books are set in places that I want to be in, that my head's all over the place all the time. I'm kind of, I want to move to France, I want to move to Italy, I want to run a restaurant here, I want to do this. So I write about it. All my books are, each book has the table at the heart of the story. And I think that once you find the food of a place, it kind of takes you by the hand and leads you into the community and the people, and right down to the heart of the family and to love, which is the table. So all my books are set around the table because, one, I always love reading. I love to read romances, but I also read cookery books just out of pleasure. And before Kindles, I used to go away and I'd have Nigel Slater in my case everywhere I went, you know, because I wanted to go to the market, I wanted to experience it, I wanted to come back and cook. And that to me is really exploring a place and expressing love at the same time. So that's why all my books are about love and food and place. And they're all centered around the table.
Great.
Well, I'm an avid reader. I think I've been reading since I was tiny, and I read all sorts of genres, but romance is the one I go back to. I read across every genre: supernatural, historical, you name it. I've read it, but there's nothing quite beats that lovely pitter-patter of your heart when the hero says something to the heroine, and you know that they're in love, and it's just that magical feeling. I think really it's adrenaline, it's a burst of adrenaline if you were going to be scientific about it, but there's nothing quite beats that when you're reading a book for me. And so when I'm writing a romance, I want to recreate that lovely feeling of falling in love and being in love. And that's my main aim when I'm writing, and I can't imagine writing anything else.
I really agree with that. It's like having an affair without actually endangering your marriage, isn't it?
I just think it's the thing that we all have in common. It's the universal thing that we have in common, you know, which is to love and to want to be loved. I think whoever you are, wherever you come from, what we all have in common is the capacity to love and want to be loved.
Absolutely, and I think there's a familiarity in that, isn't there? That you kind of, whatever type of romance you're reading, there's a familiarity in what you're feeling and what you experience when you're engrossed in those novels. So I think that's lovely descriptions. Thank you. Going back to what you were all saying earlier about how your books are all set in amazing settings, I'd like to touch on that a little bit more. All of your current books are set outside of the UK. So we've got Malta, we've got Tokyo, we've got Provence and France. So I've got a couple of questions. Why did you decide to set them outside of the UK, other than the fact that they're just so glamorous and lovely? And also, what did you have to do to create such an authentic representation? Kind of how did you go through that process of making sure it felt like the place you were describing?
Jules?
Okay. I'll start. Usually, with my romantic escape series, I try and visit the country and do my basic research then. And then following a visit, I will spend hours trawling through different books. So with Japan, I found the most wonderful book, and I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. It's on my bookshelf behind me. I think it's called Being Japan, and it was full of wonderful pictures and lots of information about the culture. So as I was reading it, I was picking out threads of things that I knew I wanted to mention that people probably might not know. And it's very important when you're writing something that's set in another country that you don't make it sound like a travel guide. And it's very easy to say, to go off on great long descriptions about familiar landmarks and things, but actually a reader wants to know that the character has been there, and they can relate. If they've been there themselves or they want to go there, they can say, oh, that was in the book, or that's in the book and I know about it. But you've got to get a fine balance between not going too far and going into great long descriptions, because people are still interested in the story and they switch off. So what you've got to do is cherry pick the things that people will relate to, but also to find hidden gems that people don't know about. So it's a really fine balancing act. But so I end up doing a huge amount of research and spending, even if I've been to the country, I then spend hours on blogs and things and talking to people from that country or who have visited and what they've been to see, to try and make it as authentic as possible, so that people go, oh, I remember going there, or oh, that's where I really want to go.
Brilliant. Sue, what about you?
A lot of my books are either set in another country or set between another country and a village in Cambridgeshire that only exists in my books, called Middledit. One or two of them are set just in that village. I like to travel. I like to write and read escapist fiction. And I always talk to, and I think Jules does as well, because we've talked about it before, I always talk to my editor about where my next book's going to be set, and whether it's kind of commercially right for me. But I was very keen to set one in Malta, because I haven't done I think it's been about 8 books since I last set one in Malta. And I think of it as my second home. I lived there for several years when I was a kid, and well, in fact, when we came back to the UK, I was 8.5, and I'd only lived in England 2 years. For most of the rest of the time, I'd been in Cyprus and Malta, and just a few weeks in Germany. I was born there, and I managed I managed to make the research for this book into 4 trips to Malta last year. So I must have known what was coming this year, that it was going to be severely curtailed. Even on the last of those 4, when it wasn't a research trip, I was only there on holiday with my husband, there were things I picked up that I realised need to go in. I had dinner with some Maltese friends, and somebody just mentioned something about Maltese schools, which I'd got wrong in my book. So I sort of scurried home and put it right. I do think people like to be taken away, and I think this year particularly, if you've got to be stuck with 4 children and a dog in a flat in a city, to be able to pick up a book and go to Tokyo or France or Malta is jolly nice.
Absolutely. It's about transportation, isn't it, and giving you that kind of escapism.
Absolutely.
Jo, what about you?
Well, as I say, all my books have started with food. So when I wrote my first book, The Oyster Catcher, I was still, I didn't know what to write, and we were invited to go to Galway for a year, and I was very unsure about doing this trip. But we went out on a recce, and I said to my husband, I want to go to a really good fish restaurant. So we went to this little restaurant, and it was like walking into a little fisherman's cottage. The fire was going, the candles were lit. We walked in, they sat us by the table. And in Galway, it rains a huge amount. And we sat down at this table, and just for a moment, it stopped raining. And the moon came out, and it came across the water sort of like a silver streak. And I went, oh, that's Galway Bay. And before that point, I sort of hadn't got the whole Galway Bay bit, but it was like, that's Galway Bay. And I sat down, I ate this plate of oysters, and I went, oh, this is sexy. And I thought, right, if I'm going to write about anything, I'm going to write about here. And oysters, and I started to learn about the shell-shucking competitions and how important it was. And as I say, to its history, you go back to the famine and the people of Galway who survived off oysters, and then the community today, and the shell-shucking competition, the international community there. And I went, I need oysters at the heart of this book. And that's how I started to write about food at the heart of the story. And then from there, the next book, then I wanted to write about, my brother was living in Italy, and I wrote about his olive grove and olive oil at the heart of the story in Puglia. And I think once you discover what is actually growing in these places, what the people are producing, to me, that's the heart of the story. And I have wanted to move and live to every single one of the places that I've written about you. I want to open up a restaurant in all of them. And going back now to this book, which was Escape to the French Farmhouse, set in Provence, I went and worked as a waitress just outside of Saint-Tropez for a year, right in the heart of Provence. But Provence has come back time and time again in my life, and I wanted to write about there. And it's the smell of the place. Once you smell those lavender fields and the smell of the heat on that soil, you want to be there. And I wanted to write, again, right at the table in the heart of Provence, because it's the food that takes you right there, right to the heart of it.
It's about creating that kind of authenticity, isn't it, I suppose, and kind of that almost giving it a soul and
yes,
bringing
I think
life.
Once you get to the food of the place, it gives it absolute authenticity. And as I say, I've done wine in southwest France, and it's about just bringing it right back to the table and the heart and soul of the place.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I've asked all three of you to choose a short section from your novels that you're going to share with us tonight throughout the next kind of 40 minutes that we've got. That sums up your novel in some way, whether that's giving a beautiful sense of the setting or the characters or the plot or whatever it is that you think you really want to share with us tonight. I'm going to ask you throughout the evening to read them out, and I wondered, Sue, if you'd like to start reading with yours, and then after you finish, maybe tell us a little bit about why you've chosen that passage.
Okay, well, the book begins, it's quite near the beginning of the book, this passage. The book begins with Rosa and Zach. They've been set up on a date by Rosa's mum, who thinks that she'll forget her ex in the UK better if she's got a lovely little summer romance, she says to her, get a little summer romance. And neither of them wanted to be on this date. They call it the fake date. And afterwards they go to what I think of as Malta's Soho, Percyville, and they go separately. But when Zach has a habit of rescuing people, and that's a theme throughout the book. And he's already got a young guy under his wing in Percyville, trying to get him away from these guys who he thinks is an undesirable influence, when he sees Rosa being hassled by a bloke, and Rosa gives this bloke the rough end of her tongue, and Zach thinks the best idea would be to get her away from him. So he's created a scenario she can easily fall in with to get away from this bloke. Zach says, look, I found my friend Lucio. We're going to get something to eat. Why don't you come along? After a last narrowing of her eyes at the swaying man, Rosa muttered, okay, called a casual goodbye to the women she'd been dancing with, and allowed herself to be steered away. Zach glanced back and saw the man make an obscene gesture in the direction of Rosa's rear view. Luckily, Rosa didn't see it, and Zach thought the wisest course was to pretend that he hadn't either. He made the introductions, and Lucio brightened enough to grin at Rosa. You told him off. He deserved it. Rosa fell in between the two men, her expression still stormy. I appreciate your help there, Zach, but women shouldn't need protection. Children need protection. Men need to understand when to back off, and when they don't, it's up to women to speak up. Completely agree, Zach put in peaceably as he led the party through the piazza and down to Spinola Bay, where the restaurants were of the calm and civilised variety, and he was pleased when Rosa went along. If she wished to continue to wander around late at night, it was none of his business, yet he'd rather she didn't. He agreed that women shouldn't need protecting, but as the elder brother of two sisters, he was aware that her desire that certain men learn when to back off might prove optimistic. The reason I chose that is because it demonstrates some major traits of those two characters. That Rosa, she's been brought up just by her mother. Her father's a waste of space. And her mother's taught her to stick up for herself. And Rosa does that throughout the book, and it doesn't always go down well. And Zach rescues people throughout the book, and it just gets him, he's a trouble magnet. It just gets him in one scrape after another. But I think they're both good traits for people to have. The setting, Patchyville. When you go to Patchyville now, this street, Trick Santa Rita, is it's made up of steps. It's very steep, and it's just neon either side of you. Bars, gentlemen's clubs, what do you call those, Shiska bars, and it's incredibly busy and noisy, and you can get any substance known to man there. When I was a child, it was a little quiet cut through from the Lido to the bus stop. So it amuses me that I've set quite a bit of the book here actually, and people getting in various scrapes there, and it amuses me that it is now such a happening, buzzing place. They call it a walk on the wild side and Partyville and stuff like that. But it was just the cut through to the bus stop when I knew it.
Brilliant. And I think the kind of vibrancy of your characters come out really strongly. I think that section summarizes it really nicely, that kind of they don't take any prisoners from each other. And even though they both got their very strong characteristics, they do seem to build a connection and an understanding with each other very early on. There's almost like an empathy and a kind of a good complicit kind of understanding of each other's characters. I was wondering, kind of, why did you choose to portray them in that way? So they don't, as you were saying earlier, they don't fall straight into romance. It's a very kind of long lead up. I'd just be interested to know kind of why you framed them in that way.
Well, Rosa's just had an uncomfortable situation with her ex, who has dumped all over her basically, and Zach has in the past, because he's had these two things in his past where he's got in trouble with the police, and it's destroyed his relationship with his father. And and at both times it's been at the bottom. What's been at the bottom of it is saving this underdog Stuart from kind of the leader of their old. I've purposely not used the word gang because it's got a different connotation now, but friendship group. There tends to be a ringleader, and there tends to be someone who gets pushed around, and Zach doesn't like to see this guy being pushed around, and both times when he's stuck up for him, it's ended up with him in trouble. So what I gave them in common, apart from not really being oven ready for a relationship, is that they're at crossroads in their lives, and they both have to decide whether to go back to the UK, whether they can stay in Malta. Luckily, the book is Brexit proof because we didn't leave. Yeah, so that's their unifying factor, and that her mum and his dad were army brats, so they were my generation. They were army brats in Malta. Spookily, they went to the same school as me, kind of knew the same people as me, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it, I have to say. Dory, her mum, is a little bit like me in that she talks endlessly about Malta and can't understand why other people don't find it as interesting.
Brilliant, thank you, Sue. Jo, a main part of your novels centres around kind of perception, and kind of it has lots of beautiful vignettes in there where you get little snapshots of lovely French kind of countryside and kind of the world that you're transporting us to. I was wondering if you could kind of share with us your little snapshot, your little vignette from your novel.
I certainly can. I'm going to, right, hang on. So this is Escape to the French Farmhouse. I was going to do a little bit of a quick edit. So that's it, okay. Right. The sun is warm already, and I'd love to sit outside and feel it on my face. But with no food in the house and nothing to sit on, I decide to walk into town. My large basket-cum handbag, which I bought in the market on our first day, hangs over my arm. I tell Ralph I'll be back with breakfast and fill up an old bucket I found in the barn with water. The sun is warm on my face as I walk around the stalls, filling the square, the streets and side streets of the town. I don't think Ollie would have liked it. He doesn't like second-hand, although Le Petit Masque de la Bande was picture perfect. He wanted to replace all its original features with new. It needed work, but I liked it as it was, flaws and all. I wander amongst the stalls piled with mirrors, chandeliers, milk churns, even beautifully carved dark wood furniture where the car park usually is, at the top of the town, in the shade of the big plane trees there. I stroll leisurely. The only thing I have to do today is make plans for the rest of my life. And right now, I want to put that off as long as possible. It's far more appealing to mingle with people, furniture, clothes and bedding, full of stories about the life they had before and waiting for a new era to begin. A bit like me, I think, and tears spring to my eyes. I blink them away. I've just walked out on 10 years of marriage and everything I know, but I can't let myself crack. I have to keep going. So that is my character Dell, when it's her first morning on her own in the French farmhouse. She and her husband moved there. They bought the dream, the French farmhouse, moved there. And 6 weeks later, the story starts with them moving back. And I know it seems a really short space of time, but that actually happened to me. I made my husband move to a house that I thought was going to be our dream property and change our lives. And within 6 weeks, we had resold it and we're moving back to where we came from, because I knew that it wasn't about the house. It was about, you know, so much more. And I'd had this dream. So, but actually what Dell discovers is that it's not about them trying to paper over the cracks of their relationship. It's about them having to make the split. And so she stands there on her front steps, watching her furniture travel back to the UK, and she decides not to go. So this is her first morning, and she walks into town, and there's a brocante market. And of course, the feeling of secondhand, of having a new lease of life is very important throughout the book. So she's walked into town, she's in the market, Sunday morning, she's got the sun on her face, and this is where she has to say, here I am, this is it, I've got nothing, and I need to start from scratch.
Right. I love how there's a little snippet of your life has woven into Dell's as well. That's really nice.
My husband hates to be reminded of that time.
What struck me when reading your novel, Jo, was the kind of the perception almost being a theme of kind of how people see each other or how you're perceived by other people. Both like the communities that are there, like how Dell sees herself, how others see her, but also the expat community that's out there. I was wondering if you could explore a little bit of why you not focus on, but why those that theme is included in your novel, why you kind of delve into it. Kind of.
I am amazed by communities who so happily embrace people just moving in, and but to me, if you move somewhere, and as I have done a lot, I've lived in France, and I've lived, I went to Ireland, I came to Wales. To me, I want to integrate, I want to be part of the community. I don't want to stand back and be an outsider. And I find that quite a strange idea, to want to go somewhere, but to keep your life from, you know, back home, as it were, going in a new place. And to me, if you go to a new place, it's like, say, we moved to Ireland, and I had 3 children who were in Welsh medium education. Now, I'm originally from England, but I moved to Wales. I have a Welsh husband, Welsh-speaking husband, and our children went to Welsh medium school. Went to Ireland, I couldn't get them in English language school, so they had to go into Irish language school, you know. And I can remember the day that I left them crying at the school, and I drove up the road crying. And that's when I first sat down and looked at the sea and said, right, well, you can either sit here crying or you can write. And that's why I wrote The Oyster Catcher. But like my Irish, you know, I learned on the sidelines of the GAA pitch, you know, because you just got to get in there and get in, and people really embrace you once you make an effort. And that's, I think, so important about if you move to a new area, is to get involved. And I'm always fascinated by people who don't do that, who want to sort of keep themselves at a distance.
And I think that sense of community and kind of belonging is really strong in your novel as well. Comes through beautifully.
Thank you.
Jules, your novel centres a lot around photography. As one of the main kind of themes and one of the main kind of things that is talked about and kind of the plot centres around. Near the end of the novel, it says, a picture says 1,000 words. So I wondered if you could kind of share your kind of extract that creates a vivid snapshot of the world that you've created.
So yes, my character Fiona is a photographer and she's a blogger, but a key part of the story is that she's staying with a Japanese family, which is 3 generations who embody the culture. So while she's staying with them, she learns a lot about Japanese culture. So this is just a very small snippet of one of it very early on in the book when she goes into the Japanese garden. Fiona turned back to the garden and took her own deep breaths, aware of the anchor of Haruka's hand on hers. She could hear the gentle flow of the fountain, water on water, could see the outward ripples of circles as though an insect had landed on the surface, the dappled shade on the path as the sun peeped through the trees. Her shoulders lifted as if a weight had been pulled away, and she felt it, a magical lightness, the sensation that she could float away, yet at the same time she felt rooted and connected. This was tranquility. It seeped into her bones, a lovely sense of peace and calm. She was aware of the scent of the trees, the touch of the breeze caressing her face, the colours and shapes of nature. When she closed her eyes briefly and then opened them, she was struck by the vividness of the greens, the delicate prettiness of the pale pink blossom, and the contrast of the dark wood of the balcony. In a sudden moment of understanding, she was glad she didn't have a camera and the obligation to capture the scene. When was the last time she felt such ease with herself, or this floaty sense of contentment, or that all her senses had been unlocked and left to do their own thing?
Fabulous. Why did you choose that in particular, that passage?
Because although Fiona's a photographer, one of the things one of the themes in the book is that photography sometimes stops you from being in the moment of something. So a lot of the time you're waiting for the perfect shot, and it's for Instagram or it's for Facebook, and you don't sit and let the image come to you almost. And we're so busy grabbing those images that we forget to sit still and actually appreciate nature and be in the moment. And that's something I discuss quite a lot in the book. It's one of the ongoing themes throughout. And it's just one of the themes in the book is also the relationship between her and the older Japanese lady and the Japanese culture, where they do have that appreciation of nature. And so there's a scene in the book where haname in Japan is a really big deal. It's going watching the blossom, and they have this saying wabi sabi, which is part of Japanese culture, which is an appreciation that things aren't perfect or finished, and that's part of their attraction, and that when you're watching nature you can capture the beauty in the moment and it doesn't have to be perfect.
Absolutely. I think that comes across really strongly, particularly in Haruka, and the way that she kind of addresses everything in the world surrounding her. Is that kind of silent calm in the way that she sees the world, and it really teaches Fiona a lesson, doesn't it, of kind of sitting back and living life rather than just seeing life through the camera.
Yes, and Fiona hasn't lived life. She's been quite a hermit, and she's lived life online and through her photography, but she's not actually gone out there and experienced much. So the book is very much about her learning to experience real life instead of just behind her camera lens.
Absolutely. How was it really challenging to kind of blend these two cultures together when you were writing, to try and get the right balance but also make them complement each other, I suppose?
No, because I could kind of hide behind Fiona because she was a blogger and she was a photographer. She had that innate interest, so I could kind of get her to unpick things and find out more and ask questions, which perhaps a normal character might not have been able to do quite as easily. And some of her observations, so there's a scene where she takes a picture of them, Haruka and her daughter, in the cherry blossom, and she's kind of able to step back and watch all of this but continually ask questions internally. So I suppose having a character who's a photographer and a blogger is a bit of a cheat in a way.
Fabulous. Thank you all so much for sharing your passages. That was really lovely to hear them come to life almost from the author's mouths as well, which is great. Kind of picking up on what you've all been saying and the bits that you've just shared with us, you use some beautiful language to describe the scenes and the settings and the characters and to really transport us into the worlds that you've created. How on earth do you go about selecting the right descriptions and the words to use? Is there like an intense editing process that you have to go through, or do you get some descriptions spot on straight away? How do you go about kind of presenting the worlds that you've created in the final versions?
When I'm writing, and I don't know if this is true for everybody, and we've all talked about it before, but I'm very much in the scene myself. I'm sitting there. If I close my eyes, it will be unfolding around me. It's like watching a film in my head. So it's just trying to get that down. And some days it bangs onto the page, no problem, and you're there in the moment, and it's really easy. And then you'll go back and tidy it up. And other days it's like pulling teeth and every single word counts. And unfortunately, there are no easy days and hard days that are all in a row. It's peaks and troughs all the time. And if it was that easy, it would be wonderful. But some days it comes easier than others. And sometimes places inspire you more than others. So when I was writing Tokyo, when I was writing about the cherry blossom, that was very easy. When I was writing about the digital museum, that was very easy. But when I was writing about the Sky Tower, which is the tallest tower in Japan, there are towers everywhere, all over the world. What's different about this one? And so that was much harder. But also, when you're doing description, you have to remember, as I said earlier, it can be very boring just to do a long, flowery description. What you have to do is weave the characters' emotions and feelings and actions into the description as well to make it more interesting. So if you are really stuck on the description and you're kind of wallowing in it, you just think, hang on, what's the character's reaction to this? How's she feeling? What would she like to do next? Or how's she responding to what she's seeing? And with Fiona, that was very easy because as a photographer, she was looking for the angles, the light, what was new. So one of my favourite scenes is where she sees the Torii Gate for the first time, but then she sees the toddler who's gazing up at it in complete awe, and she decides that's the picture she wants to get. It's that capturing someone's first view of something so amazing which she's just experienced herself.
Brilliant. Jo, Sue, what about you?
For me, it's to put myself there. It comes back to the table, as I've said before. When I go to these places and visit, it's about food memories. And we all have food memories. We can all remember a meal that takes us back somewhere, and we can all remember how that meal made us feel, whether it be your birthday cake when you were 7, or Granny's Mandarin tart or whatever. That feeling of love that often comes through when someone has cooked a meal for you, created a meal for you. I often write about food memories on Twitter and things, when I can remember being in a place. And it's not always about the food in the plate, it's how that food made me feel. So if I'm writing, as I say, and I'm writing about the food, it's about the food memory and how my character feels at that time, how this food has made her feel, how the memory makes her feel. So again, it's, as Jules was saying, it's about how the character feels in the place. And once you can go back and discover how she feels, then you can then go back and fill in what it actually is, but it's about how she feels.
Well, to pick up on what you said, Sammy, it's a mixture for me of editing and what I get down in the first impression. And I definitely agree with Jo and Jules about passing it through the character's head. I like to make use of simile and metaphor, because you can get across a lot of description in a short, even a half a sentence, if you liken something to something. If I wrote something about a cruise liner and likened it to an apartment block or a floating apartment block, we'd all know that it's not really made of brick. But they're just such massive things, these cruise liners, with so many like rabbit hutches one on top of the other, that I think it gives you the correct mental picture. I think all the other senses as well, smell, what you can hear, something like a heat haze in you know, a summer book, and the sun toasting the grass to golden. I try and think of words I haven't used very much, and I try and employ colour. One of the things I've been struck by listening to Joe talk about food is how little I think about the food. I don't know, maybe it's, I don't, you know, if I never cooked again, that would be fine by me. If I never went round a market and bought another onion, that would be perfect. I do like to go to restaurants and eat what someone else has cooked. That's great. But as soon as it's my birthday or anniversary or treat and somebody says, what do you want to do? I want to go out to dinner. And so I think that's reflected that my characters, I hadn't thought about it until just listening to Joe, my characters go out to eat a lot.
Brilliant. I hadn't thought about that either. I had one of my questions is that food runs through all of your novels, but I hadn't thought about them in the different ways, that whether you're eating in or eating out, other than it's a nice homely sense that comes through all of your books.
Well, there's quite a lot of food in Somewhere on a Sunny Island just because Dory is a celeb cook.
Yeah.
But she only became a celeb cook because a guy told me an anecdote about a current celeb cook. It is repeatable, but I won't embarrass anybody in case the person ever got to hear of it. But it just, that sparked off that entire character, really, and I actually took the anecdote out in the end. It didn't really fit that well with the book. So I did have to learn a lot about being a cook. And the vegetarian chef, Katie Bescow, helped me. She was brilliant. But I don't like wallow in it like Joe does. It doesn't sort of everything come back to it.
Brilliant. Right, I think we've got time for one more question from me, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor. So if you have some questions ready, I'll come to you in a minute. My final thing would be to ask, for those who maybe don't like romantic fiction or think they don't like romantic fiction because they've got a perceived idea in their head about what it is, what would you say to persuade them to perhaps just give it a go this summer while the pandemic's still raging? Pick up one of the novels, give it a try. How would you persuade them to do that?
Should I go?
Well,
Go on then.
Yeah. I think for me, it's a friend of all of ours is an author called Katie Ford, and she always describes her books as getting into a warm bath. And I think particularly in these times that we've been in, I think escapist fiction, armchair travel, has been so important because there is so much going on, and that we all, what I think that our readers have got from us is that you can go somewhere where you feel that you're visiting friends and you know that nothing really bad is going to happen. It's all going to turn out okay. I mean, reading one of my books, what I want you to feel is that you've come around for dinner, you've had a nice time made new friends, you've eaten some fantastic food, you know, you've laughed, you've cried, you know, and you've left feeling thoroughly satisfied, and that you'll come back again. You know, I want you to feel that you've come to my table every time you read one of my books. So I think that in these particular trying times, that's what I am, and I think we're all trying to do, is to give people not only armchair travel, but a place of safety where we're telling stories that will ultimately make you smile.
I think that who we hook up with and spend our lives with romantically is one of the most important decisions we'll make. It's more important than which university we go to or which job we go to. It's a massive decision, and I think that it ought to be given a lot of thought, and all the stories that are around it are many and legion, and they don't have to be sickly sweet or anything. They are jolly good stories of life.
Absolutely.
I'd agree with both of that, but I think one of the things is love is a universal theme. There are love songs, films, and why wouldn't you want to read one? I mean, how many people do you know that have been murdered or know a murderer or anything like that? And yet everybody knows someone who's in love or has been in love or wants to be loved. And I think it's such a universal theme. It's far more relatable than most other subjects in books. So why wouldn't you want to read one?
I think we just don't take it on to its natural conclusion either. We end at a happy point. Well, anybody who's ever had a happy relationship, somewhere along the line, you could end it there and it would be great. And it doesn't matter if 20 years later things aren't so great. We don't write about that part, that's all.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that's a lovely place for me to end my questioning. Do anyone in the audience have any questions? If you do, there's a little reactions button just at the bottom taskbar on your screen. You should be able to see it. If you do have a question for any of the ladies, then pop the thumbs up or the whatever other options there are, and we'll come around and unmute you and you can ask your question. Don't all rush at once. If not, I have some spares.
I have wine. Oh,
here we go. Tina, I'm going to unmute you. Hopefully that's worked.
hello, Tina.
Hello, Joe. Hello. I recently spoke to you, Joe, on Messenger. Thank you ever so much for getting back to me.
My pleasure.
I just read one of your books, as you know, and it was about the vineyards in France. And I was so engrossed in what you were doing and how you explained all about the process of the winemaking. How much did you actually know before you wrote the book, and how much did you actually have to investigate and look into?
That book scared the life out of me. My editor said, she'd like me to write a book about wine in France. I know lots about wine. I know how to drink wine. I can drink quantities of wine, but I know absolutely nothing about how to make wine. And so it really scared me. And then what I realized I had to do is I had to be that character, which was someone who drank wine or whatever, but knew nothing about wine and had to go and find out about it. So obviously I did have to go and visit France and vineyards a lot, and that was really hard research, Tina, on your behalf. It was really hard research going and trying all that wine. But it was, so I had to put myself in the character's shoes, which is, yeah, I've drunk wine, but I know nothing about how to make it. And this character finds herself in a vineyard and she knows nothing about how to make it, and she's got to find out. So and I did go back a lot. So I visited a fantastic organic vineyard. I visited Laithwaite's, where they were bringing in the grapes and making the wine. So I did do an awful lot of visiting vineyards. But there's also a real sense around the winemakers, the actual guys who make wine. There's a real secrecy as well, which is what they're doing. They don't really want you to see. I met another guy who bought a vineyard, and he had a winemaker who would come in. And that's my Jack Russell barking, by the way. And he had a winemaker come in. He never really knew what sort of magic he did. And so, yeah, so I met an awful lot of people, talked to a lot of people, and drank an awful lot of wine writing that book.
One thing I did want to ask you, though, was when she fell in, did you know, is that something that you knew about?
Yes. Yes, so this guy who owned a vineyard, he bought a vineyard. He said, "Oh, this is the thing." He said, "It's a really big thing that people don't realise. If you fall in," he said, "you can, absolutely, with the carbon dioxide or whatever, you can just croak it type thing." So that was from talking to someone who owned the vineyard. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Fabulous, thank you, Tina. If I could ask you just to pop yourself back on mute, that would be great. Does anyone else have any other questions?
It was Linda had one, didn't she?
Did Linda have one? Let's see.
Yes, I did.
Hey.
Hi. Given that you were also talking about love as a universal theme and so on, cheeky question. Who would be your fantasy companion for one of your research trips?
Very good question.
Who's going?
I can go. I know
Go on,
exactly
Jules.
who it is. So I'm of a certain age these days, so my fantasy companion would be compatible, and I have a bit of a thing about Rob Lowe. So he would be my fantasy companion, I'm afraid. And I have actually based a character on him before in a book. And I do, when I'm writing, I do tend to have an image of someone who I'm writing about, who is my current hero. Just find it a little bit easier to visualize them in my head. I might describe them slightly differently, but I usually have someone in mind when I'm writing.
Shall I go, Sue? Are you
Come
going?
on, Joe, yeah, I'm still thinking.
Okay. Well, I'm lucky enough that I do go on research trips with my best friend, who is Katie Ford. So we do go on research trips together. And we've been to lots of places. So we've been to France quite a lot. Sorry, you're going to see people crawling across the floor behind me. Trying to be very quiet. So Katie and I go on an awful lot of research trips together. We went on the first research trip. We went to Ashby to go husky racing. I decided that I wanted to write a book about huskies. It was an absolutely terrifying trip. And you know when you get that kind of nervous laughter. And we came back and we'd taken off our boots. We were freezing cold. And we got to sort of halfway up the stairs to our hotel room. And we got that nervous laughter where we couldn't move. And we were just doubled over in laughter. And the dear receptionist said, "Shall we send up gins, ladies?" It was like, yes, send up gins, you know. And so from then on, Katie and I have done lots and lots of trips together. She always wants to take a map. I always rely on the sat nav. It's a running theme. So we've gone to France. We've gone to Spain together when I wrote Sunset Over the Cherry Orchard. We have been, where else have we been? Oh, we went to Swedish Lapland. Now that was amazing. We went over a frozen lake. A Viking turned up, picked us up. Went on a skidoo with us in the back. Well, it was just amazing. Went out husky racing there. So we've done some fantastic things, and we have laughed and laughed and laughed along the way. And those that follow me will have seen our trips together. And we went to Provence for this book as well, and went to the Lavender Museum, and we did a wonderful cookery course in Provence. It was fantastic. So I'm very lucky that I do travel with my very best traveling companion.
And she also says that you're the naughtier of the two when you're on your trips.
Well, she comes along with the ideas.
Yeah, I don't know who I would choose really, because like Joe, I've been lucky enough to have some great research companions in real life. For Malta, the author Maggie Sullivan was with me for one of the trips. My husband was with me for one of the trips. My brother was with me for one of the trips, and they all do their bit. I can remember for a different Malta book, actually, I was saying, I'm just wondering how deep the sea is here, because it was a marina, and whether it was exactly the right place for this particular size boat. And there were some guys fishing, and my husband just went up and said, "Hello, mate, do you know how deep it is here?" And this fisherman just turned his rod round and like plumbed the depths and brought out the wet bit and said, "That deep." And we said, "Oh, thank you very much." And Michael said to me, "That's about 2 meters." Okay, that's fine. And my brother does a lot of research for me anyway, who's the one who came to Malta with me. And then Christina Courtney took me to Sweden in December for my next book, Christmas Wishes, which was awesome because she is half Swedish. She took me to her mum's, and she'd lined up all these relatives and friends. She found out what the book was about from me and lined them all up, and I interviewed them all, and she made sure that I'd made notes and that I had their names down correctly for my thank yous afterwards and everything. It was brilliant. It was like having a PA, historian, translator all in one.
Fabulous, thank you. I think that's probably all the time we've got now. We're getting near to the end of our allotted time. So I'd just like to say thank you to Joe and to Jules and to Sue for coming along. Thank you to all of you for coming along, and for those of you asking questions as well. If you've got any feedback from this event, we'd love to hear from you. So please make sure you drop us a message on our social media, drop us an email, or come onto our website. If you enjoyed the event and are able to spare a donation to help us keep our work going, that would be fantastic as well. A £15 donation equals a free Wantage Literary Festival bag, so it's well worth the donation. And don't forget that you can also get yourselves a copy of all of the books we've been talking about today. Details of the local independent bookshop that you can get that from are on the Facebook event page, so check the details out there. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you for coming, everyone.
Everybody.
Thanks, Sammy.
Thank you, everyone.